The park was quiet that afternoon, the kind of peaceful silence you rarely find in a busy city. Families sat on blankets, couples walked hand in hand, and a few kids kicked a football across the grass. Birds fluttered around the lake, the sun reflected off the water, and a light breeze moved through the trees like nature was humming softly. Steven Seagal stood near the edge of the lake, wearing a simple black jacket, faded jeans, and calm eyes that had seen more storms than sunshine. He wasn't there for attention. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He was simply feeding ducks with the same stillness that made people around him feel safe without knowing why. But then, the peace shattered. The ground rumbled with the thunder of roaring engines. A biker gang tore into the park like a storm of noise and smoke, their motorcycles rattling everything they passed. People flinched. Kids covered their ears. Even the birds scattered. At the front of the pack rode a massive, tattoo-covered biker with a thick beard and a leather vest. His name was Rex, the Rhino, and he enjoyed two things: attention and intimidation. He revved his engine louder than everyone else, making sure the entire park knew he had arrived. The bikers parked right in the middle of the walking path, blocking families and frightening children. Rex jumped off his motorcycle, grabbed a beer can from his saddlebag, and crushed it with one hand just to show off. His gang laughed loudly, pushing each other and yelling like the park belonged to them. A small boy, maybe 8 years old, dropped his football from fear. It rolled across the grass and stopped near the biker's boots. Steven noticed. Without hesitation, he bent down, picked up the ball, and began walking toward the child to return it. But Rex saw something else. He saw Steven stepping toward him slowly, calmly, without fear, and his ego twisted the moment into a threat. "What's this old man think he's doing?" Rex grunted, tossing aside his empty can. Before Steven could even hand the ball back to the boy, Rex stomped forward, grabbed Steven by the collar, and slammed him back against a tree. The entire park gasped. Parents froze. Kids screamed. Phones lifted into the air as people recorded. Rex leaned in, tightening his grip, eyes burning with arrogance. "You walk in my path again," he growled, "and I'll choke the life out of you, old man." But what Rex didn't know was that the man he had just grabbed was someone he should have never touched. And what happened next? No one in that park will ever forget. Riverside Park had always been the kind of place where people came to escape the noise of everyday life. It was wide, open, and peaceful, far enough from the main roads that the sound of traffic faded into nothing more than a distant hum. Children played tag near the big oak tree. Couples lounged on picnic blankets. Elderly men chatted on benches about old memories, and joggers traced the winding paths along the river. It was Sunday, the one day the city seemed to breathe slowly. Steven Seagal stood alone near the lakeside railing. No fanfare, no entourage, no cameras, just Steven, a small paper bag of bird seeds in one hand, tossing gentle handfuls into the water. He wore a simple black jacket, slightly faded jeans, and boots that had clearly lived through years of use. His posture was calm, almost meditative, his eyes steady and observant, as if he saw everything without looking at anything. For a man known by the world, he moved like someone perfectly content being invisible. A family nearby snapped a quick photo, whispering to each other, unsure if it was really him. But Steven didn't turn. He didn't react. His silence blended him into the environment like another tree or stone or shadow. He was part of the peace, but peace never lasts long when ego arrives. The rumble began faintly, a low vibration under the ground that only the dogs noticed at first. A couple of joggers slowed, confused. Parents looked up. Kids stopped mid-play, listening, and then the quiet tremble grew louder, 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 until it wasn't a rumble anymore. It was an invasion. A pack of motorcycles roared into the entrance of the park, engines screaming, exhausts spitting smoke like dragons breathing fire. People turned in shock as the noise ruptured the serenity. Birds erupted from the trees. Ducks scattered from the lake. The peaceful Sunday shattered like glass. At the head of the group rode Rex, the Rhino. He didn't get that nickname by accident. Rex was broad, thick-necked, tattooed from wrist to shoulder, with a beard so heavy it looked like it weighed more than his helmet. His leather vest was covered in patches, some earned, some stolen, all meant to signal dominance. He didn't ride into places, he arrived in them, expecting the earth to bow slightly beneath his feet. Behind him came 6 more bikers, each loud in their own way, revving engines, shouting, laughing, throwing crude jokes across the air. They tore across the grass instead of following the paved path. They didn't care about children nearby or families trying to enjoy their afternoon. Noise was their power. Intimidation was their fun. Rex screeched his motorcycle to a halt right in the middle of the open walkway. People stepped back immediately. Some parents lifted their kids into their arms. A few teenagers pulled out their phones, half to record, half to pretend they weren't intimidated. The bikers started acting as if the park was their territory. One tossed a full soda can onto the grass. Another revved his engine in front of a jogging woman just to startle her. A third kicked a trash bin over and laughed when papers scattered. Rex dismounted slowly, making sure everyone saw him. He grabbed a beer can from his saddlebag, cracked it open, and took a long drink. When he finished, he crushed the can with his hand, then tossed it onto a picnic table without a second glance. A little boy nearby, maybe 7 or 8 years old, watched them nervously. He held a bright red football, the kind with small white stitches, and tried to stay out of their way. But fear makes hands clumsy. When one of the bikers revved loudly, the boy flinched, and the football slipped from his grip. It bounced once, twice, then rolled straight toward Rex's heavy boots. The boy's eyes widened. He didn't dare go after it. Stephen, who had been feeding the ducks, noticed instantly. Without rushing, without making noise, he bent down, picked up the football, brushed off the dirt, and started walking toward the boy to return it. But perception is often the victim of ego. Rex saw Stephen walking toward him, not the boy. To Rex's twisted mind, Stephen's calm steps looked like defiance, like challenge, like disrespect. Rex wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and stepped forward, blocking Stephen's path. His boots planted firmly on the grass as he stared straight into Stephen's eyes. "You lost, Grandpa?" Rex sneered. Stephen didn't raise his voice, didn't change his expression. "I'm returning this to the child," he said, lifting the ball slightly. Rex scoffed loudly so everyone could hear. "Oh, so you're a hero now? You think you can walk past my boys without showing respect?" Stephen's voice remained steady. "I don't want trouble. Just doing what's right." Rex's lip curled. "What's right? Is you backing up before I teach you some manners?" Before anyone could react, Rex stepped closer, towering, loud, aggressive, completely unaware of the quiet storm he was provoking. "Before we continue, tell me in the comments, what should happen next? Fire the biker or forgive him? And salute to everyone who stays calm when others try to provoke them." The moment Rex stepped closer, the atmosphere in the park changed. The air grew heavy, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Parents pulled their children behind them. Couples backed away. A group of teenagers recording the scene whispered nervously, unsure whether they were about to witness a simple argument or something far worse. Stephen stood still, the little red football still in his hand, the lace marks pressing lightly into his fingers. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise a hand. His breathing didn't even change, but Rex's ego couldn't comprehend calmness. To him, stillness wasn't peace, it was disrespect. Rex leaned forward, his breath thick with beer. "You deaf, old man," I said. "Back up." Stephen's eyes didn't waver. "You should be careful how you speak in front of children." That single sentence, the gentle tone, the calmness. It infuriated Rex more than any insult could have. Rex snarled, "You think you're some kind of saint? You think standing there quietly makes you special?" One of the bikers hollered from behind, "Hey Rex, show him who runs the park." The gang laughed loudly, feeding Rex's ego like gasoline thrown onto a fire. Stephen spoke again, voice soft but firm. "I'm not here to fight you. Let me return the ball." Rex grabbed Stephen's jacket collar with one hand, yanking him forward so violently the football slipped from Stephen's fingers and rolled across the grass again. The boy gasped. The parents gasped. Even the nearby ducks scattered at the sudden movement. Rex wasn't done. He shoved Stephen hard against the trunk of a large oak tree. The bark cracked slightly under the force. "Now you're gonna listen," Rex growled, pressing his forearm across Stephen's chest. "You don't walk into my space. You don't act calm when I'm talking to you. When I speak, people get scared. That's how this works." Stephen looked at him. Not angry, not intimidated, almost disappointed. "Fear isn't respect," Stephen said quietly. "But I don't think you understand that." Rex's face twisted with rage. "Oh, I'll make you understand." With that, he shifted his weight and wrapped his thick, tattooed arm around Stephen's neck, tightening it in a choking hold. His bicep bulged as he squeezed. Determined to prove his dominance, gasps erupted from every corner of the park. A woman screamed. A man yelled, "Hey! Stop! What are you doing?" But none of the bystanders dared to intervene. The image of the biker gang, the tattoos, the roaring engines, it scared them into silence. Stephen didn't struggle. He didn't claw at Rex's arm. He didn't even tense his muscles. He simply placed one hand lightly on Rex's wrist, as if guiding a child instead of stopping an assault. "You should let go now," Stephen said softly, his voice steady even as Rex tightened the choke. Rex laughed wildly, spit flying. "Oh yeah? And if I don't, you gonna call the police? You gonna cry for help?" "No," Stephen said. "You might just hurt yourself." This only made Rex angrier. He squeezed harder. Stephen's feet lifted slightly off the ground. Nearby, a couple of joggers stopped dead in their tracks. A man took out his phone with shaking hands, whispering, "Someone call the cops." The little boy who owned the football clung to his mother, tears filling his eyes. Rex's gang cheered him on. "Choke him out. Teach him not to look at us. Make him beg." But Stephen's expression didn't change. He didn't panic. His breathing remained calm, measured, controlled. "Last warning," Stephen said quietly. "For your own sake." Rex roared, "Shut up." He tried to tighten the choke even more, but something unexpected happened, something Rex couldn't comprehend. Stephen shifted. It was subtle. A tiny movement of his feet, a slight turn of his hips, a gentle twist of his wrist. No one even understood what they were seeing. One moment, Rex had Stephen in a chokehold. The next moment, Stephen had Rex's wrist twisted backward in a way that shouldn't have been possible. Rex screamed. A raw, guttural sound tore from his throat as pain shot up his arm. His knee buckled. His balance broke. His entire body twisted uncontrollably as Stephen guided his momentum with effortless precision. The crowd gasped again, louder this time. There was no punch, no kick, no dramatic martial arts flip, just a simple, controlled movement that disarmed Rex instantly. Rex stumbled backward, clutching his wrist in agony. His face turned pale. Shock replaced arrogance. Confusion replaced rage. What the hell? What did you do?" Rex groaned, breath rapid, eyes wide with fear. Stephen lowered his hands, unbothered, as calm as when he had been feeding the ducks moments earlier. "I used your force against you," Stephen said softly. "You're angry. Anger makes you reckless." The bikers stepped back. Even they were stunned. The toughest among them muttered, "Yo, Rex, you okay?" Rex stared at Stephen in disbelief, his bravado cracking. He had never been handled like that, not by a bigger man, not by a trained fighter, and certainly not by someone who never fought back. The entire park watched in stunned silence. No one cheered, no one laughed, no one moved. The only sound was the quiet rustling of leaves overhead, as if the park itself was exhaling. Stephen stepped away from Rex and quietly picked up the red football again. He brushed the dirt off it, then looked toward the frightened child. But before he could return it to the boy, a new sound appeared in the distant sirens. 2 park officers were running toward the source of the commotion, and the moment Rex saw them, his face drained even further. His regret was only beginning. For a long moment, the park stood frozen. Not a whisper, not a shuffle, not even the flap of a bird's wing moved through the air. The shock was too thick. Everyone was processing what they had just witnessed. Rex, the rhino, known for breaking noses and threatening anyone who crossed him, stood hunched over, clutching his wrist like a wounded animal. His chest heaved. His eyes twitched in confusion. He didn't understand what had happened. 1 second he was in full control, choking an older man he expected to collapse. And the next, he was powerless, undone by a tiny movement he hadn't even seen. The bikers behind him shuffled uncomfortably. They weren't used to seeing their leader stumble, let alone yelp in pain. One of them muttered, "Dude, he didn't even fight back." Another whispered, "Bro, Rex just got folded by an old guy." The laughter they carried earlier evaporated into pure discomfort. A few steps away, Stephen stood calmly, brushing dirt off the little red football. Not triumphantly, not arrogantly, just quietly, like someone who had handled a minor inconvenience rather than a violent assault. The little boy who owned the ball peeked from behind his mother's leg. His wide, watery eyes locked onto Stephen, silently asking, "Is it safe?" Stephen offered him a small nod, and the boy's shoulders relaxed. Parents began whispering among themselves, "That man just saved himself without hurting him. Did you see how fast that was? He barely moved. Is he some kind of expert?" A jogger approached carefully, squinting at Stephen. Wait. I know that face. Is that no way? That has to be him." A teenager zoomed in on his phone camera and almost dropped it. "Bro, guys, it's Steven Seagal. I'm not lying, it's him." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A couple of middle-aged men whispered like excited school kids. "He's a martial arts master. Dude, he trained special forces. I used to watch his movies every Friday night." Meanwhile, Rex heard the murmurs, heard the name, and his stomach plunged. Steven Seagal? No, it couldn't be. He had just grabbed a man whose wrists alone had ended fights on 6 continents. He had tried to choke someone who had disarmed armed attackers with a single step. He had laid hands on a man known for never escalating but always finishing. Rex swallowed hard. Sweat rolled down his temples, but embarrassment wasn't done with him. The rising wail of sirens grew louder. The 2 park officers, who had been called by panicked bystanders minutes earlier, were now sprinting toward the scene. Radios crackled at their hips, and their eyes darted around, assessing the situation. People pointed in unison. It was him. That guy grabbed him. He choked the older man. He attacked for no reason. The officers moved fast, instinctively stepping between Stephen and Rex, putting themselves between the victim and the aggressor. "Sir, are you all right?" one officer asked Stephen. Stephen nodded gently. "I'm fine. Nobody's hurt." Rex's jaw tightened. Stephen wasn't accusing him. He wasn't calling for revenge. He wasn't doing anything except telling the truth. But that truth cut deeper than any insult. The other officer turned to Rex. "Drop your hands where I can see them." Rex frowned. Hey, I didn't know who he was," he blurted out, voice cracking. The officer's eyes narrowed. "Doesn't matter. You grabbed him by the neck. Multiple witnesses saw you assault him. I thought he was messing with me. I didn't know." Rex insisted desperately. "Not knowing who he is doesn't give you the right to attack someone," the officer said firmly. The bikers stepped backward, distancing themselves from Rex to avoid getting pulled into the situation. Their earlier bravado had evaporated. They muttered things like, "Bro, you're on your own. We told you to chill. He messed up bad." Seeing his own gang back away hit Rex harder than Stephen's wrist lock. Meanwhile, a small crowd surrounded Stephen now, but respectfully, keeping distance. People didn't bombard him. They didn't shout. They didn't ask for photos. They just watched, awed. A woman approached him cautiously. "Sir, thank you for not letting that get out of control." Stephen shook his head softly. "I didn't stop anything. He chose his actions. I just redirected them." The officer at Stephen's side blinked. "I knew it," he said. "I've seen your tactical training videos online. The way you moved, only one man does it like that." Stephen gave a small, humble nod. "Just trying to stay peaceful." Rex watched all this with his mouth half open. Peaceful, gentle, controlled. Everything Rex wasn't. Something in his chest tightened. Not pain, not fear, but shame. For the first time in a long time. Shame. The officer turned back to him. "Sir, you're going to have to answer for what you did." Rex shook his head quickly. No, please. I didn't mean harm. I just thought." Stephen's voice cut through gently. "You thought anger made you strong." Rex froze. The words hit him harder than the wrist lock. Stephen stepped forward, not threateningly, but with the calm confidence of a man who didn't need to prove anything. "Strength isn't loud," Stephen said. "It doesn't need a motorcycle or a crowd. It's quiet, controlled, respectful." Rex swallowed again, his throat tight. He had spent years roaring for attention, and now, in front of dozens of witnesses, an entire park of families, he realized he had misunderstood what power really was. He lowered his gaze. He didn't have words. He didn't have excuses. He only had regret, heavy, suffocating regret, and the consequences were only beginning. The entire park felt frozen. The bikers' men stood stiff, their tattoos looking smaller than before, their voices gone, their bravado evaporated. Families watched from behind benches, unsure whether to cheer or stay silent, and there, In the center of it all stood Steven Seagal, calm, unmoved, breathing slow and steady, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Rex, the biker leader who had tried to choke him minutes earlier, lay kneeling on the dirt. His forehead was sweaty, his breath trembling, his hands hovering in the air, not in defense, but in surrender. The massive man who moments earlier roared like a monster now looked like a frightened child caught stealing. "Stand up," Steven said quietly. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The authority in it was stronger than any shout. Rex slowly rose, eyes downcast, unable to meet Steven's gaze. His men exchanged quick looks, unsure whether to pull Rex away or run for help or whether to simply vanish entirely. Steven studied all of them. Not with anger, but with a heavy, almost disappointed silence. "Why did you attack that boy?" Steven asked, nodding toward the teen who still stood with his parents, clutching his bruised wrist. Rex swallowed, but words stuck in his throat. One of his men muttered, He bumped into Rex's bike." Steven raised an eyebrow. "A child bumps into your bike, and your response is to choke him? This is what you call strength?" Rex finally lifted his head, shame twisting across his face. I don't know, man. I was having a bad day. Lost my job. My girl left. My brother's here. They were watching. I didn't want to look weak." Steven stared at him for a long moment, and then he said something none of them expected. "Hurting others doesn't make you strong. Controlling yourself does." The words landed heavier than any punch. Rex blinked, caught off guard. He expected threats, insults, maybe even revenge. Not wisdom, not compassion. Steven stepped closer, forcing Rex to look him in the eyes. "You attacked a child. You attacked me. You nearly destroyed a moment that was supposed to be peaceful." Rex lowered his head again. "But," Steven continued, "I've met thousands of men like you. Angry on the outside, broken on the inside. It doesn't have to stay that way." Rex's lip trembled slightly. His men looked stunned. No one had ever spoken to them like that, not without fear. The boy's father stepped forward. "Sir, he hurt my son. There should be consequences." Steven nodded. "There will be." He turned to Rex. "You're going to apologize. Not because I'm telling you to, but because it's the first step toward being someone worth respecting." Rex's chest rose and fell quickly. His pride fought the words. His ego shook. But the eyes of the boy, his parents, and even his biker crew weighed on him like mountains. Finally, he walked slowly toward the family. The crowd held its breath. Rex knelt in front of the boy, a sight no one expected. His voice cracked. "Kid, I'm sorry. I'm real sorry. I shouldn't have touched you. I acted like a fool." The boy glanced at Steven, who nodded gently. "It's okay," the boy whispered. "Just don't hurt anyone again." Rex's eyes shimmered, and he stood, wiping his face quickly so his crew wouldn't see. Steven stepped beside him. "Good. Now the second consequence." Rex looked confused. "There's more?" "Absolutely," Steven said. "You and your men will spend the rest of the day cleaning this park. Trash, benches, graffiti, everything." One biker scoffed. "We're not janitors." Steven stared at him. "You became cowards the moment you attacked a child. Today, you earn back a piece of your humanity." The biker swallowed hard and fell silent. Rex nodded slowly. "Yeah, we'll do it. All of us." Steven stepped back, letting the weight of the moment settle. Children peeked from behind swings. Parents exchanged surprised, relieved looks. People who had recorded earlier kept filming, but now with admiration instead of fear. As the bikers grabbed bags and tools from their bikes, Rex approached Steven one last time. "Why didn't you humiliate me?" he asked quietly. Most men would have. Steven placed a hand on his shoulder. "Because I don't fight to destroy people. I fight to wake them up." Rex nodded slowly, something shifting inside him, something that looked suspiciously like respect. Steven turned toward the path, walking away as though the entire confrontation meant nothing. But everyone watching knew differently. He had just changed the ending of a story that could have turned tragic. And he didn't do it with fists. He did it with strength, the kind that comes from character. The sun had begun to lower, casting warm orange streaks across the park as Steven walked away from the scene. But behind him, something remarkable was happening, something even he hadn't expected to witness so quickly. Rex and his biker crew, the same men who strutted in like they owned the place, were now scattered around the park with trash bags, gloves, and old brooms. Their tattoos glistened with sweat, their boots stumbled over uneven ground, their loud voices had gone quiet, replaced with focused grunts and the sound of scraping. Families who earlier hid behind benches now watched openly. A mother whispered, "Are they cleaning?" A father chuckled, "Looks like it." Kids who had cried only minutes earlier now pointed, stunned. "Mom, that big guy is picking up bottles." Rex himself worked the hardest, wiping graffiti off a stone table with a soaked cloth. His hands shook, not with rage, but with something heavier. Responsibility. The boy he had grabbed earlier stood a few feet away with his parents. They didn't say anything, but the boy's gaze rested on Rex with a mix of confusion and cautious hope. Stephen paused near the park exit, watching all of it silently. He didn't smile. He didn't interfere. This was their moment, not his. The old groundskeeper, a thin man with silver hair and a slow walk, approached Stephen with a broom in one hand. "Sir, what you did today, I haven't seen in decades," he said softly. "Most people fight violence with more violence. You didn't." Stephen nodded. "Anger doesn't cure anger," the man chuckled. "Wish the world understood that." Back near the benches, Rex's men kept glancing toward Stephen, as if afraid he'd suddenly judge their work, but he didn't even look their way. That bothered them. They weren't used to someone who didn't need to prove himself. One biker finally spoke, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Hey Rex, why's he not watching us?" Rex paused, leaning on the trash picker. "Because he doesn't need to," another man frowned. "What's that mean?" Rex sighed deeply, dropping the last can into the bag. "It means some men test you with fists, others test you with your own conscience." His crew stared at him, confused but thoughtful. Something had cracked open inside Rex, a piece of truth he had buried for years. Meanwhile, Stephen walked to a quiet part of the park where a small fountain stood. Children dipped their fingers in the water, watching the ripples. A woman approached him, pushing a stroller. "Sir, thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Stephen asked. "For stopping a disaster without making another one." He simply nodded. Gratitude never sat heavily with him. Humility kept his shoulders grounded. A group of teenagers approached next, phones in hand. They weren't recording this time, they just wanted to shake his hand. "Sir, that was amazing. You saved that kid. You didn't even break a sweat." Stephen raised a hand gently. "Listen, strength isn't for humiliating others. It's for protecting them." The boys looked at each other, impressed. Back near the center of the park, the bikers had finished almost half the cleanup. Sweat soaked their shirts. Dirt covered their knees. But something unexpected happened. They began talking differently. "Hey, hand me that bag, man. Yo. Careful with the glass. Hold up. Let me help with that." Their voices softened. Their movements steadied. They worked like men trying to repair something inside themselves. Rex walked over to the family he'd hurt. The boy stood with wide eyes, his parents still cautious. Rex spoke first. "I'm not asking you to forgive me again. Just wanted you to see I meant it." The father stared at him for a long moment. His jaw clenched, then relaxed. "You're doing the right thing," the father said finally. Rex nodded and returned to work. Stephen took a slow breath as he watched the family walk away. Redemption was rare. Watching it begin was even rarer. The old groundskeeper tapped Stephen's shoulder again. "You leaving already?" "Yes." "You won't stay to see the end?" Stephen looked toward the bikers one last time. "It's not my story anymore." Before he could take another step, Rex jogged toward him, wiping his hands on his jeans, breath shaky. "Hey, Stephen," he said quietly. "I know you owe me nothing, but I gotta ask." Stephen turned. "What is it? How do you stay calm like that? When someone attacks you, insults you, disrespects you, how do you not explode?" Stephen considered the question. The wind brushed through the trees, carrying the scent of cut grass and fresh dirt. He answered slowly, "Because I know who I am. When you know that, other people's actions can't shake you." Rex lowered his gaze, absorbing the words like a man discovering something he should have known years ago. "Thank you," he whispered. Stephen rested a hand briefly on his shoulder. "Change starts today, not tomorrow." Rex nodded hard. "I won't forget this." Stephen turned toward the path again. The sky was darker now, the park glowing with golden light. Behind him, The bikers kept cleaning not because they were forced, but because something in them had shifted. The world had not changed, but a few men in leather jackets had, and that was enough. The last light of the evening stretched long across the park as Stephen finally walked down the winding path toward the exit. Behind him, the bikers were still working, their figures moving slowly but with purpose, men who came to the park as bullies, now humbled by a moment that would stay with them forever. Stephen didn't look back. He didn't need to. What mattered had already taken root. As he reached the gate, an elderly woman with a cane stepped forward from a bench. Stephen had noticed her earlier, quiet, observant, watching the entire confrontation with sharp, knowing eyes. "Son," she called softly. Stephen paused. "You taught those boys more today than anyone else ever has." He bowed his head slightly. "They taught themselves. I just held up a mirror." The woman smiled, her wrinkles deepening. "Most men don't carry mirrors. They carry weapons." Stephen nodded once, then continued toward the path, but her words stayed with him. Because she was right. The world had plenty of fists, hardly any reflection. A few steps later, he passed the young boy and his parents again. The mother hugged her child tightly, tears drying on her cheeks. The boy gave Stephen a shy wave. "Thank you, sir," he called. Stephen raised a hand in return, his expression soft but unreadable. The father approached him quietly. "If you hadn't been here, I don't want to imagine what could have happened." Stephen shrugged gently. "Bad things only win when good people stay silent." The man swallowed hard. "Well, today, you weren't silent." Stephen's reply was simple. "Neither were you. You protected your family." The father blinked, surprised by the praise. Stephen continued walking, leaving the family behind with a sense of peace they didn't have before. As he headed toward the parking lot, voices echoed behind him. Not tense voices, not angry voices. Conversations. Laughter. The kind that returns to a place once fear has left it. Rex's voice rose above the rest. "Yo, Luis, grab another bag, man. We're not done yet." One of the bikers groaned. "Bro, how much trash is in this park? Enough to remind us why we're doing it," Rex replied, but there was no bitterness in his tone. Only sincerity. Stephen paused for a moment, listening. Sometimes healing wasn't loud, it was simple, honest, unexpected. He reached a quiet stretch near the lot, where the trees arched overhead like an old, natural cathedral. The world was calmer here, softer. He sat on a wooden bench, taking a slow breath. For the first time all day, he allowed himself a moment of stillness. A jogger passed by and recognized him. "Hey, great work back there." Stephen nodded politely. Compliments never interested him. Purpose did, the jogger added. Most people would have fought back the same way. Stephen opened his eyes. "If I did, I'd only be feeding the fire." "What'd you feed instead?" the jogger asked. Stephen stood and began walking again. A chance. The jogger didn't fully understand, but he knew it meant something important. As he reached his car, the sky dimmed to deep blue, and early stars began to appear. Stephen unlocked the door but didn't get in immediately. He rested his hand on the roof, staring at the horizon as if searching for something far beyond the park. A soft breeze rustled the leaves behind him. He spoke quietly, almost to himself. "Respect isn't who you show it to. It's who you are when no one expects it." He let the words settle into the evening air. Behind him, the bikers were still working, still sweating, still changing. Families were beginning to return to the park walks, now that the danger had passed. Children ran near the swings again. Life had resumed, but differently. Stephen finally got into his car. Before closing the door, he took one last look at the park. At the laughter, the gratitude, the second chances. Then he spoke softly, but with conviction. Strength isn't about winning fights. It's about choosing not to start them. He closed the door. The engine hummed, and Stephen drove off into the fading light, leaving behind a story that every witness would remember, not because of the punches thrown, but because of the lesson learned. And that lesson was simple. True strength is calm, true respect is universal, and true power is the ability to change hearts without ever raising your voice. If you believe humility is real strength, type respect in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. I want to thank every kind soul personally.